Hello, and welcome to the Kevin Mannix Report. I'm Kevin Mannix, and I'm your host for this program, which is designed to give all of us a little more insight into what goes on in government and who some of the individuals are who are involved in government on behalf of our community. Our guest today is a gentleman who has moved to Kaiser, Oregon as the new Chief of Police, Marc Adams.
Morning, Kevin.
Welcome to the report.
Well, thanks for inviting me here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you on board, and I say that not just in terms of the program, but since we are produced in Salem and on behalf of the Salem-Kaiser community, since you're the new police chief in Kaiser. How long have you been on the job now?
Well, let's see, I started in Kaiser December 8th after, gosh, 18 and a half years down in Coos Bay. And I'm telling you, it's been a pleasure since to come up here. The community's just welcomed me, and it's been very friendly. And a great crew of folks to work with at Kaiser PD, so I'm very happy to be here.
Is it a bit of adjustment to move from the coast to the Willamette Valley?
Yeah, I tell you, last week or so with the weather warmed up, I thought, wow, this is great. Why did I wait so long? Today's a little more like the coast. It was raining when I came over today, so.
Oh, what the heck.
Yeah.
One of the things we try to do on this program is to give folks a little more information about people in the news and government in terms of their background. So, sometimes it almost sounds like a job interview, but can you tell us a little bit about where you come from, where you went to school?
Be happy to. Well, I grew up in Houston, Texas. Came out to Oregon in 1975 in the United States Coast Guard. And then I married an Oregon girl, and we moved back to Houston, and then I missed Oregon, so I came back out here. I graduated from Linfield College in McMinnville, and well, the FBI National Academy after I got into management in the police department. So I've had a nice career out here, and I've been in Oregon longer than Texas now, and I still sound like I just got here. So
well, you have a little bit of that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, what was it like doing police work in Coos Bay? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Coos Bay was is a bit different from policing in Kaiser. Coos Bay, a bit more of a rural area, and we were also the hub city for a large rural area. But the biggest difference is the economy there. A lot more underemployed and unemployed folks, and a lot of poverty compared to the area up here. On the other hand, there's some things different in Kaiser. It's a little more, it's more of a metro area. Some of the crime's a little different that way. The gang issues that we deal with in Salem-Kaiser was something we didn't have in Coos Bay. So that's been an adjustment for me, dealing with those types of issues. Did
you come to Kaiser as something for looking for a new challenge, something new to do?
Yeah, I really did. I wanted to get into more of a metro area. I am a absolute fanatic on community policing. I think that's the way to go. That's the future of policing in this country. And we were doing a good job in Coos Bay, but I wanted to come up to an area and try something new with a new department. And Kaiser's been just perfect. Good foundation for community policing there, and we're the officers and staff at the department and I are partnering with the community, and I think we're going on down that road to bring community policing to its fruition here.
One of the things that some folks may not quite understand is what the concept community policing is all about. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. The key pin to community policing is problem solving. Without problem solving, all you have is a public relations program. But community policing is really just the partnership of the police, the community, to solve problems. Traditionally in policing, we respond. You get your house is broken into or something stolen. We come, we take the report, we do a great job of taking that report and filing it, and occasionally finding out who did it. And as you well know, in Oregon, we've done a great job of convicting these folks and filling up every prison in the state. We haven't done a very good job, and that's problem solving. Why are we going there? Why do we come back over and over? And that's where we have to get. We have to make that turn. I believe a big problem in this state is if you look at the broken window theory, and that's we let too many things slide in the early stages before we bring out the hammer.
Now, the broken window theory is something that's been used in New York and in different ways in San Diego and in Boston. The idea being that if you leave a broken window in a building, that's an invitation to people to break others, to do other things, because it shows that the owners or the residents don't care. Right. Do you want to elaborate a little more on the idea?
Well, what I think happens, let's take juvenile criminals, and I like that term better than juvenile delinquents. When you let someone commits a theft in the third degree, and all they get is a letter from the district attorney's office saying, don't do that again, because our system's so crammed, well, it's an easier step to the theft in the second degree. And then from the theft in the second degree to the first, next thing you know, you've got a robber out there. We need swift, sure punishment when that first theft's done. Even if it's we don't have to incarcerate, but if it's just a fine or community service, something right off the get-go.
A sanction right off
the get-go. Dr. Kelling, you mentioned in New York City, he went to the subway system and they studied this terrible crime problem they were having in the subway system. And he looked at it, and they were really working hard to catch muggers and all these major crimes were occurring in the system, but nobody was bothering with the turnstile jumpers and the graffiti people. And he said, hey, look, you got to start enforcing these little things. When you let those go, it's just like leaving that broken window in the building. Before long, all the windows are gone. You've got to start hitting right off the get-go on the little things, and the rest will fall into place. And that's a big part of the problem solving. The other issue is when we go somewhere more than twice for the same kind of problem, we need to step back and find out, why are we doing this? What is the core problem? Let's take that out. We don't go there anymore.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if you look at domestic violence, for example, if you've had more than 2 calls to a given residence with a given family, that ought to be a signal that something's seriously wrong. That can't just be dealt with a quick, let's deal with this situation, but let's find out what the deeper problems are.
And what we've done, police have done traditionally, is we're the cops and you're not, and we'll take care of that. And with community policing, we suddenly say, okay, let's see who else are the stakeholders in this problem. A lot of times with domestic violence cases, when you're going there over and over, you're going to find that adult and family services may be involved, parole and probation may be involved, child services may be involved. There's a whole key, and you'll find all these agencies all spending our tax dollars working on the same problem.
Each doing a little piece of it, not working
and
together.
not communicating. And in some cases, they can't communicate due to different laws that prevent privacy issues that we can't talk. Well, what we're doing now is multidisciplinary task forces. We are communicating. We have a pilot program going in Kaiser now with parole and probation, where parole and probation officers are teaming up with police officers. We know crime's concentrated. We know that the majority of crime is done by a minority group of criminals, and these same criminals, this small part of our population, is also the same people that parole and probation are dealing with all the time. So why don't we partner together? And and so we're doing things like that to work smarter, at the same time working with the community. I like Sir Robert Peel's quote, that police officers are just members of the public doing full-time, being paid to do full-time, what's incumbent upon every citizen to do at least part of the time. And that's what we're trying to do, is partner with the community, and not be, I'm a cop and you're not, call us for everything. Let's work together. And it works. It works, and sometimes it takes a while to make that change. It's labor intensive. That's one of the problems we're having in Kaiser, is we have a bit of a shortage of police officers.
In fact, you're going to take care of part of that problem.
Well, I'm hoping so.
If the funding is made available.
Right. We've applied for a COPS grant to help offset the cost, but we brought in we asked the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training to provide a LEMAP, which is a Loan Executive Management Assistance Program study. We brought in a couple of experts to study our personnel needs assessment, and they advised us we immediately need, with 6 more police officers and 5 non-sworn support people. So we're working on filling those positions now and coming up with the funding, and that will help us, because we need to be able to get proactive, do problem solving, and not just react all the time.
Now, as part of this whole process, it seems that as we approach criminal justice in Oregon, there are a lot of pieces to this jigsaw puzzle, and we're finally getting some of them in place. You mentioned, for instance, we are incarcerating the violent felons now for a decent amount of time to put them out of circulation, which ought to allow us to focus on some other issues and other areas of concern. One of the problems we seem to have is that a study that's being conducted right now suggests that a very large percentage of the people in the county jails are felons. Some of them are there deliberately because the state made a deal with different counties to house them. But some of them are there because it's pre-trial, or they're there on probation or parole revocation, or they're awaiting sentencing after conviction. And it seems as though the county jails are being filled up with a lot of felons, which makes it harder to deal with the misdemeanors. And the misdemeanor crimes are the lower level crimes, the felonies are the heavier duty crimes. I suppose one of the things we're going to need to make sure happens is when you do have a misdemeanor and you convict them, that there is some sanction, and if it's not community service, if it's more significant, that we have the space in the county jail.
We need the space in the jails. You got to have those beds. You know, there's a lot of threats and a lot of sanctions that can happen, but you got to have that ultimate.
For instance, if he doesn't do his community service, what do you do? Say, I'm going to send you a letter?
Yeah. That's right. You know, there was a prominent case here recently where, you know, a fella in prison for life commits a felony, you know, a murder in prison and gets life in prison again, you know.
Doesn't quite work. There was no additional consequence for him.
You've got to have those consequences. You've got to have those beds, and that's a problem that I know you're aware of. That you have to have it there. You don't always have to use that. And we could step out of the box and look for alternative consequences before you get to there. But you've got to have that. If you don't have that hammer, you know, these people aren't going to listen to you. And I think it's a mix. You know, you got to have the sanctions there, and we have to do the education and the enforcement, but we all have to work together. And I think Oregon's coming to that. I think we're doing a better job in the last 5-10 years, and the agencies are starting to work together. Good leadership in our legislature. I mean, it's been incredible what I've seen in the last 10 years, and we're going to show the fruits of that down the road. Oregon's going to be a better place to live as a result.
Well, the one good statistic that we have is that violent crime has gone down.
Right.
In the first full year after implementation of Measure 11, it went down 9.9%, which is about 5,500 less violent crimes. And that's an absolute number. This isn't per 10,000 population or whatever. This is absolute reduction in violent crime, even as population continued to increase and the youthful population increased. So we've seen a shift here where the word has gone out, and whether it's the deterrent effect or the incapacitation, when you're pulling people off the streets and you're not letting them back out again, we're turning the corner there. But we seem to have a real problem with property crime still.
Yeah, and again, I think that's because a lot of those crimes, nothing happens the first time, the second time, the third time that they're arrested. And we have to address that. But I think the fact that in Oregon now the word is out, we're not fooling around. You're going to do time. It goes back to that broken window. We've addressed a lot of that, and now we have to get serious about the smaller ones. And that's going to be the next issue. Is that we won't get as many swings at the plate before you actually do the time.
There is a petition that's being circulated that deals with repeat property offenders, and as we speak, we don't know whether it'll get on the ballot. I happen to be the chief sponsor of the petition, but it gets at the issue of no sanctions first time around. Unfortunately, under current law, if I don't have any record of motor vehicle theft, I can steal a car and I'll get probation. If I don't have a record of house burglary, I can break in and burglarize someone's home and I'll get probation. And on a lot of repeat offenses, such as burglary of businesses, the sentencing guidelines for felonies keep saying probation, 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 until the judge decides someone's so bad that he'll go outside the guidelines. And the judge has to make a determination that there's substantial and compelling reasons to go outside the guidelines. And I think that's what you're referring to when you say for some of these crimes right now, the sanctions aren't there, so we've got to have something of a hammer and say, at some point, we're going to hold you accountable.
And one of the things the police are doing now, by working with parole, probation, these different agencies, we know, for example, in Kaiser last year we had 168 stolen cars. Now we know we don't have 168 car thieves running around the city of Kaiser. We've got 2 or 3 people that are stealing a lot of cars. Well, we have to work together to figure out, knowing the crime's concentrated, who these people are. And once you identify them, then we work with parole, probation, DA's office and all to say, we don't want this guy slapped on the wrist. We want him hammered. Let's don't give him a plea bargain. Let's don't do anything. Let's go after them and get these people put away. And that's where I think community policing, problem solving can play an important role until the law is changed, or if the law isn't changed, that we can start identifying the criminals that are producing most of our work. You're always going to have your crimes of passion and the one-timers, but the majority of your repeat offenders, your true criminals, it's a small group of folks. You'll find that in most communities, the majority of your calls for service are in like 10% of your locations. 40% of your victims are 10% of the population. All this is concentrated. And there's usually, when you talk about the true career criminal, it's a small group of folks who do a lot of damage out there. Now you've got the other, you know, the one-timers and those kind of crimes, but we need to do a better job, and I think we're getting there as partnering, figuring out who these folks are, and then legally going after them and putting those folks in jail where they need to be, or creating an environment that's hostile to their lifestyle, so they'll go somewhere else.
Well, in fact, when you talk about this, it sounds too as though there are ramifications that are very positive in terms of law enforcement, in terms of investigation and arresting people. If I remember in New York, you mentioned the turnstile jumpers, people who weren't paying their subway fares, and the graffiti. As I understand it, one of those turnstile jumpers was arrested and fingerprinted, and lo and behold, over the next few weeks, they had a series of very serious rapes, and I don't even know if it was killings, but very serious crimes. And then they ran fingerprints. They got one fingerprint from one of those crime scenes, and they ran it through, and it matched this turnstile jumper. A person who had no record, and they otherwise would never have been able to track him down and stop him.
Yeah, you can go back to Son of Sam. You know, he was picked up off a parking citation. You know.
So that's where your total enforcement will help you have an inclusive approach. I wonder too about community involvement or backup from citizens. One of the things that San Diego is doing is a program they call RSVP, Retired Senior, I guess Retired Volunteer Senior Patrol, or some such. These are folks who are certified. And granted, that's a big city police department. They have the resources to put together a program like that. But what they do there is they allow them to patrol during daylight hours, and they don't carry sidearms, but they are capable of issuing certain kinds of citations, but more importantly, being able to investigate crimes and take, for instance, fingerprints even on car clouts, which normally the police just can't get to those things. Have you thought about some volunteer efforts in Kaiser that you might be able to use to supplement the police work?
Yeah, we use a lot of volunteers, and currently, like in the office, they do a lot of work helping us in that area. Our biggest tool, though, with volunteers, I believe, you know, one of your best crime-fighting tools out there is an informed public, and citizens that are aware. We have in Kaiser the city divided into 3 community policing districts. Each district has a community policing association. They meet monthly. And then we have a main committee that oversees the whole thing. It's all citizens, volunteer activity. We've provided training. We take some of these folks with us to community policing teams training. And they go back and help educate their neighbors. And when you have a neighborhood that everybody knows each other, they communicate, they're aware, that's a great crime-fighting tool. We use volunteers for things like monitoring speeding with our radar reader boards and things like that, which again is one of those low-level things but needs to be enforced. So that's a great tool for us there. I don't know, I'm not a real big on having a lot of folks running around out there patrolling and calling in more calls. I would rather help educate the community.
So that they're your eyes and ears.
They're their eyes and ears, and what we do is at our monthly meetings, we identify problems and communication with the citizens that they see as a problem. Now, I may, as a police officer, I may think the problem is one thing, and when you talk to the neighborhood, oh no, our problem is speeding vehicles, you know. So as they identify the problems, then we include them, and okay, help us figure out a way to solve that problem. Now, say it's speeding vehicles. We don't have the manpower to put a police traffic officer on every street. So the citizens have to help us. So there's a lot of ways citizens can help police their own street for speeding vehicles. We did a project in Coos Bay I thought worked real well, using the old, it was barber shave or signs.
Burma shave?
Burma shave. That's Burma shave signs where we had a street that was opened up and became kind of a thoroughfare. Well, everybody was concerned about the speeding. Well, we had done a study prior to opening this street, and you had about 3-4 cars an hour traveling down the street. After they opened the street, you had 300 or 400 cars an hour traveling down the street, but they weren't speeding. The majority of the cars were doing the speed limit. It was the amount of cars that gave the perception, but still there was some speeding, and the public was really concerned. They felt the street wasn't safe anymore. Well, might as well not have been straight. Once you don't feel safe anymore. So we did these signs all the way down the street. We made up the signs, kind of professionally done, said, you know, please, next yard slow, next yard down, you know, kids, joggers, all the way down the street. And the last two signs said radar ahead. And then we trained the neighbors how to use the radar board, the radar gun and the radar reader board, and they set it up. You know, and they all feel like they had some ownership, because we also know from our study that the majority of people who were speeding on that street lived on that street. So they, you know, we gave them some ownership over their problem. We didn't have to tie up a police officer, and they're very happy now with their street. So there's little things like that we can do that folks get involved, and it helps.
Well, as we're talking about ownership of solutions, we'll have to ask our audience to recognize ownership of the program. Right. They are our owners because they're our viewers. You're with us on the Kevin Mannix Report, and I'm your host, Kevin Mannix from Salem. If you have any questions or concerns at any time, I hope you'll feel free to write. We'll be running an address on the screen. It's 2003 State Street, Salem, Oregon 97301. You can also call 391-8031 in Salem. Normally we have a recording on that telephone number, but you can leave a message and we'll get back to you. That's 391-8031, and the area code is 503. We're always happy to hear from you. Shifting back to you, Mark, and this sense of ownership, do you find that there's sort of a synergistic process here, that as the police become more involved with the community and show that they're trying to be problem solvers, not just reactive, the community reacts to that positively and becomes helpers in that solution?
You bet, Kevin. It's incredible, the synergy that's created there. And it makes for a better community all the way around. And that's one of the things I really like about Kaiser. That city has so much energy from its community. They're involved in so many ways, which just makes for a better place to live. And the other thing that's changing with police, I think, is your police officers are becoming more and more of a professional type of police officer. The old days of you know, I'm a cop and you're not, and you know, is going out the window. We're recruiting. We're looking for the type of personnel now who can interact with the community. That can be professional, polite, courteous, while still being able to enforce the law when that's necessary.
And in fact, in Oregon, the certification standards to be a police officer are much higher than they are in most states, which many people aren't aware of that.
Yep, and getting higher. I remember when, you know, today, the type of person we're looking for today is really a lot different than the fellow they were recruiting when I became a police officer. The men and women that are coming into this job today, we want folks that can be a law enforcement, but they can also be a peace officer, and that they can interact in a community meeting and work together with folks. And I think it's just it's making the job better, but our communities are getting a better product as a result of that.
Well, that kind of training and certification, and this is an off-the-wall question, it seems to me at some point we might ask the courts to revisit some old constitutional decisions which relied on throwing out evidence based on the notion that that was the only sanction available to deal with police officer misconduct and failing to apprise someone of their rights or failing to get a warrant when it was required under the Constitution. And the sanction, which was a court-imposed sanction and devised to uphold citizens' constitutional rights, was the exclusionary rule. We will exclude that evidence from the case. And the argument at the time was, well, disciplinary methods, professional standards won't do the trick. But gee, we're going back to the 50s and 60s, and there's been such a change in police officer standards. I would think today, as a matter of professionalism, officers would be concerned about disciplinary action for having failed to give someone their Miranda rights, for example.
I believe that there should be some other way. I mean, if the evidence was obtained improperly, then they ought to discipline the officer or find another way, but you just don't let, you know, oh, darn, you know, we're going to let you get away with murder, literally in some cases, because of this technical mistake. To me, it seems crazy in our society.
It might be then that at some point in the next few years, communities, governments may want to raise the issue with the U.S. Supreme Court as to whether the exclusionary rule, a court-devised rule, that it's sort of like the death penalty for evidence. There is nothing short of the death penalty. Either the evidence is in or it's out. Is too strong a sanction given modern policing standards and the community standards that we've established of professionalism.
You know, and we're going to have to continue to bring up the standards for everybody. One of the things a lot of folks don't realize that, like in Oregon, you have a lot of, or in the whole nation, most police departments aren't Portland-sized police departments. They're not even Salem-sized police departments. They're 3, 4-man. The majority of police departments in the United States are less than 10 officers. You have to have training, training, and training. An attorney doesn't stop training just because he passes the bar. A physician doesn't stop training just because they get their medical license. It has to continue. Well, most police departments of size, it does. But in some of these small places, they really struggle with that. And that's where the state has got to help continue with that.
Well, that's a good cue then. So one of the things the state could do in terms of helping local governments, which are short of funds, in fact chronically short of funds since Measure 5 came in, or at least tight on funds, maybe short's too strong a term in some circumstances, but tight on funds, is to say there'll be state-sponsored programs for small police departments to assist in maintaining training for police officers.
Well, in Oregon, we're currently, the DPSST and all is reviewing and looking for ways to do that, to improve regional training and what have you. So some of these small agencies around the state get top-of-the-line training.
Are there a few other things you'd like to mention? We only have a couple of minutes left, but from a state perspective, things you'd like to see the state doing to help you do your job as Chief of Police of Kaiser, Oregon?
Well, I think to continue to provide the support to the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. I think the state needs to support the state police. The number of troopers on the road is just, since I started police work, is just dismal. You can drive, I frequently drive from here to Coos Bay, and you don't see a trooper the whole time, and that's a strain. But I think we're getting there. The more longer I'm in government, the longer I see how hard it is for local governments to spend the tax dollar wisely. There is no fat on the bone anymore. And that's tough, and I think we just continue to need that kind of support and trust.
Well, one of the notions in regard to the State Police Patrol Division, and we did have a representative from the State Police on one of our shows talking about it, is that with those troopers on the road, of course they're doing patrolling, they're providing highway safety and taking care of accidents and speeding and all of that, but it's also a very significant law enforcement tool because a couple of things. One is it sends a message to the community that there is a presence. There is somebody who cares and will pay attention. But second of all, in their routine enforcement, people who break traffic laws often are folks who break other laws.
Yep, they're not walking from burglary to burglary or robbery to robbery, they're driving.
And I-5 seems to be one of the arteries of criminal commerce as well as other kinds of commerce.
Exactly.
So I guess there are broader ramifications to it. Some people think of it as just as speeding tickets, but there's much more to it.
That's absolutely. There's a whole lot more folks in this country that are maimed, killed in automobile accidents than there are from robberies or burglaries. And at the same time, it's the majority, I would bet, of criminals that are arrested come via a car stop for some traffic violation. So that's an important tool.
Well, it sounds like you're well apprised about what Kaiser needs and its demands for the future, and it also appears that you're well equipped to help meet those demands.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us on the program.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, folks, we're also glad you joined us on the program. We hope that you'll continue to watch us on the Kevin Mannix Report. Our guest today was Mark Adams, the Chief of Police for the city of Kaiser, Oregon, one of our growing, bustling cities. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.